presentation, or I can get you to all come forward so you can have a look at it. And I'm more than happy to run this as a 45-minute workshop conversation about regulation, what we found, what I think is going to happen going forward, and some key lessons. I think it'll be much more entertaining that way. I'm happy to answer any single question or query you have within reason, but rather than just vomit a PowerPoint on you, can I just encourage you to come forward so you can see the slides. One or two will be helpful. Would that be okay? There's loads of seats up the front. The great thing is sitting in the back row in the last table is I can get to ask you guys all the questions, so it's Ofsted Hobbits die hard. Michael, you're not going to introduce me, so I'll just talk about my favourite subject myself, or are you happy to...
Well, some people need no introduction, and you did it really well, John. But anyway, let's do it officially. So John Byrne is the lead CQC-wise GP for the central area, and somebody who's worked with us before in terms of coming and presenting on the CQC, and is quite a nice human face of the CQC, which is...
soft, cuddly.
John's words, not mine. So, with no further ado, John Byrne, CQC.
Can you hear me without the microphone? No.
So you want me to use a microphone? Okay. Well, first of all, good morning. Michael, thank you for inviting me along. If Carlsberg did LMCs, they'd probably look at Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire or Wessex LMCs as an example of how to do it. And I'm going to give you some data which will demonstrate that's the case. We have been working really closely with Nottinghamshire LMC probably for the last 3 years, and some of you may have come across us before at some of the presentations we've done and how to pass the exam questions. I'm not so sure has anyone seen me before at some of the talks we've given. Yeah. So it's really nice 2.5 years in, or 3 years in, to come back and tell you a little bit about what we found. I have a corporate slide set. Some of my thoughts aren't on the slide set, and if any of you want an opinion and ask me a question within reason, I'll endeavour to give it, as well as some of the top tips that I've seen. So I'm John Byrne. Most of you will have worked out that I'm probably from Dublin and not Australia or New Zealand or some of the other weird and wonderful places people think my accent is from. Came to the UK in 1996, spent 6 years in the British Army training to be a GP for better or worse, and then was a partner down in the surgery in Andover, Hampshire, for about 12 years, including being a GP trainer. So I was once of the tribe, but then I went to the dark side, which was working for a large foundation trust, did some commissioning work, and I clearly am on the dark side now that I'm going to work for the CQC. So you all know what the purpose of the CQC is. You're all going to get these slide points anyways. Our current model of regulation, first of all, you've got to register with us, and then we use some data, and we go out and we inspect you, and we give you a rating, and if necessary, if there's any people to be put on the naughty step, we call that enforcement in the CQC, and then we act as an independent voice and advocate for those people who don't have a voice sometimes. My instinct will tell me that people's biggest bugbear is probably being with registration. Yeah, I see lots of nodding heads, particularly from practice managers and stuff. Interestingly enough, I have not had much negative feedback about people's experiences of being inspected. People are always worried and anxious about the inspection process and the lead-up, but actually after the inspection has taken place and we publish the stuff, actually we haven't had too much negative feedback. That's the scope of our remit. In other words, if it provides healthcare, we regulate it, or we're figuring out ways to regulate it. Now, I think the really interesting set of stuff going forward will be not so much the new models of care, it'll be the digital health space, those digital providers, and the independent sector. So there's lots of weird and wacky stuff out there we're currently trying to get our heads around. Anyone in the room from a surgery which was rated as outstanding? Stand up. Happy to stand up, tell us where you're from. Well done. Any other surgeries rated outstanding? Okay. I'll come back to you in a second. So there's the feedback from the surgeries. Okay, I have to put this up. It says that people really like us and we've done a wonderful job. But actually it's reflective of most of the feedback we do get. So what have we found so far? Well, as of this week, we will have inspected 8,000 GP providers over the last 30 months or so. So we pretty much completed our 1 or 2 people who are getting inspected today or tomorrow every single surgery in the country. And to date, we've published over 6,000 reports, so we're working off more than anecdote. And I think we've published 111 inspection reports in the Nottinghamshire area, with 5 left to go. So, how do people think Nottingham has done overall? So, if the average number of outstanding surgeries is 4%, how do you reckon you've done? And if the average number of goods is 85%, requires improvement is 9% and 2% for inadequate. So that's roughly the national ratings. Would anyone like to hazard a guess how Nottingham has fared over the last... Outstanding. What percentage of your surgeries do you think have been rated as outstanding if the national average is 4%? Slightly higher. Play your cards right. You're going to have to give me a number. 7%. Anyone want to go higher? Higher? Lower? Lower? Okay. If we go down to the other end of the scale, small numbers, but how do you think you'll fare vis-a-vis 2% inadequate nationally? Anyone want to have a guess? 4%. Okay. Would you like to see the Nottinghamshire figures? Does that surprise anyone? So I'm happy to have this as a conversation. Why does it surprise you? And why are you surprised at 12% outstanding? You haven't heard that 12% are outstanding. Okay. So the man from our outstanding practice. Has any other surgery in your locality or from the Nottingham area come and knocked on your door after you got your outstanding rating and said, "You're wonderful, how did you manage to do that through gritted teeth, and what can we learn?" No. I suppose the point that I would make, having seen over 2,000 surgeries being inspected in the central region, is that general practices or providers have missed a trick in terms of learning from each other.
Just a slight counterpoint. The view might be that when you're outstanding or when you're good, there's no material difference. So if you're getting it good, then why what's the difference when you get outstanding? I know that's the short term, but there's other more pressing stuff on our plates at the moment.
And that's a valid view, and I wouldn't dispute that. However, if a surgery is rated as inadequate or requires improvement,
That's different, that's what I'm saying.
I think that's a slightly different matter. And the point I'm trying to make here is that I have been surprised at how few surgeries have either read report before we've tipped up, not so much in Nottinghamshire, and how few surgeries have read other people's reports. In other words, to share the learning. Not just about outstanding and good, but actually what are the common sort of pitfalls. And I'll come across some of the common pitfalls. I think part of the reason Nottinghamshire has done so well is in part due to your LMC. Because they started running training workshops about 2 years ago, Michael, with Derbyshire. And I was in record at saying at that point that the greatest risk factor with the surgeries who didn't attend the workshops as opposed to the ones who did And I think when they looked back over the attendance records, there was some validity in that. So not only are you providing really good general practice in this patch, but actually what the LMCs have helped you to do is avoid some of the common pitfalls which we picked up in other areas. And I think you're an outstanding rate of 12%, even on small figures, which is 3 times the national average, is a fantastic reflection on the quality of care people get on this patch. Because you have the same challenges in Nottinghamshire as that you have in any other area of the country. Everyone likes to say their area is different, but the reality is the problems are pretty much the same wherever you go in terms of small practice sizes, deprivation, ethnicities. All the same challenges are there. A solidly good 70%. So the national average, you're around 80% of surgeries are good, and your sort of Nottinghamshire average sort of hits that as well. There was only 5 inadequate surgeries. 2 of them are no longer in existence, and another 2 of those surgeries which were rated as inadequate have been re-rated as good as ORI, so they've all improved. Where do people think surgeries have fallen over in terms of the rating? Typical slide, deliberately so you can't see it from the back. Safe. And that's predominantly where most surgeries up and down the country have fallen over. Now everyone would like to think it's about falling over in terms of Legionella, DBS, and some of that stuff, but the reality is that's not where surgeries have been tripping up in terms of safety, although those are the anecdotal stories.
Could you give us an example of that? Because I struggle a little bit with this.
Yeah.
I mean, we're very happy and you to please that our practice was reasonably good. Having spoken to practice where safety has been raised, and sometimes struggle from the outsider's point of view to see precisely where. Can you give some examples?
I have a slide over examples. There's 4 or 5 3 key areas where people constantly fall down, which has resulted in a rating of requires improvement. Are there any awkward questions people want to ask me which I can try and answer as we're going along? And that's not an awkward question, by the way. So,
inconsistency of interpretations at different practices. I've been in 3 different practices, which is probably quite unusual, and the things the CQC have challenged one on and not another. It's something that really sort of I find quite a culture.
so delighted to talk about variability.
So that's some things like
Yeah.
infection control, where one unit have really gone to town on it, and the other one they haven't, and actually my experience was we're both at the same level.
Yeah, so more than happy to talk about inconsistencies, where they're real and sometimes perceived, but absolutely. Anything else people want me to touch on?
The inability to have a realistic dialogue after the results being advised.
So the FACAT process, and we don't like the scores and the doors, and how we... Okay, happy to talk about that. Michael, can somebody just capture some of these? I'm pretty sure I'll cover them, but yeah, any other?
That is a similar thing that we question a bit about is, and they say, well, if you don't like it, you can come and do it again, which I don't think is particularly helpful.
No, it's not particularly helpful. Why on earth would you want us to come round to your house all over again? I certainly wouldn't. Okay, happy to... So I'll cover off that sort of what happens post-inspections. Okay, anything else?
I've got several. Fees justification, be good.
Some things I'm going to do slopey shoulders on. That might be work.
Variability again, but we've had 2 visits, different teams, totally different angles and different views. Some consider things outstanding, another one didn't. So
Yeah.
And then the 3rd point has now slipped my mind.
But you'll stick up your hand when you remember it. Okay. So variability, key theme. How you go about challenging this is another theme. A little bit about fees. Anything else? No. Would people expect the way we have inspected over the past 2.5 years to have changed in any shape or form? Yeah. So you all would have expected us to start out with a particular methodology and approach, but vary it as we go along. Would that be fair to say? Now, why would we vary what we do and what we ask if we're meant to have a consistent approach and that you all have the same experience. Any thoughts on that? Learning. And I think that would be my key, not excuse about the variability of experience, but we certainly do things differently now compared to when we started 2.5 years ago. And I would argue that any process where you take data, human beings, put them together in new teams, put them into a surgery to do an inspection, and put them into different types of surgeries every week, it's inevitable that you're going to get some variation. And you get variation in terms of interpretation or judgments. However, there is something about our process which reduces the impact of any potential variation. And that's about how we do our report. So every single report is written by an inspector. It must be signed off by the specialist advisor who is present, or specialist advisors, in terms of, yes, this was the inspection, this was the place I looked at. It then goes to a peer review, it then goes to an inspection manager, and it then goes to a regional panel. So it probably goes through about 4 or 5 phases before the report is ever published. So that gives us plenty and ample opportunity to reduce some of the variation which we'll see between inspectors and make sure we have a consistent approach. Does that mean to say that what we might have said as outstanding 2.5 years ago we would now consider outstanding 2 years later? I'm not quite so sure in that, because as we have learnt as we've gone along about what is really important and perhaps what's less important. So if I was going to come to what have we learnt, and this goes back to the heart of safety, is what we have learnt is looking at NHRA alerts, is that there has been significant failings in certain parts of primary care and general practice to understand what MHRA alerts are about, why they're out there, and how practices go about actioning them. And we've found similar failings in safety around the whole high-risk medicine piece. And that includes, we would consider ACE inhibitors a high-risk medicine, but also methotrexate, azathioprine, and other medications like that. And when we started out 2.5 years ago, the risks around those particular drugs and their monitoring, even though it fell under our remit, perhaps wasn't as understood at the very start as it is now. And that was learning we came across as we went along. So look, these are some of the outstanding characteristics. Easy to access appointments and services. The interesting thing about that, more often than not, that data is based on patient perceptions through the National Patient Survey. But there is a correlation between the National Patient Survey and the quality of services in terms of if you look at our judgments and ratings. That doesn't mean to say we start with the National Patient Survey and give you a rating, but outstanding surgeries tend to have higher patient feedback right across the board than inadequate surgeries. But it's not linear in any shape or form. Good and effective leadership, well, what does leadership mean? What does management mean? Well, I think there's a difference between leadership where people sort of have an idea, they have a vision, and they know how to drive it forward, and the managerial skills to make sure that the things that happen. And the difference between outstanding surgeries and good surgeries is that they understand the difference between leadership and management and do both effectively. Open culture, it's another easy phrase to bandy about. What does it mean? Trust me, when you go into a good surgery or an outstanding surgery, there is something about the culture which is open, and it's about learning and sharing, which you will get in good surgeries, which you won't get in surgeries which are not good. Working with multi-professional colleagues and support from other organisations. This is the piece about how you work beyond boundaries. You know, we all know that health visitors have disappeared over the horizon into some sort of space where we don't know where they live anymore, we don't know what they do. It's more difficult to see district nurses and community staff, as they call themselves. But some practices have managed to overcome some of those issues to maintain strong links and bonds, but they've gone beyond that and they're closer working with pharmacists. Supporting patients and carers with their emotional needs, and touching on what Chan said earlier, there's something about self-managing long-term conditions. The one feature that isn't up there is, for me, is the role of patient participation groups in surgeries. We've seen some incredible PPGs which are supported by surgeries that do some fantastic work, particularly around supporting patients to self-manage their own conditions. And there's lots of them out there. So I think the old style approach of the them and us between surgeries as partners and PPGs, where you break down those barriers, you get a tremendous resource for free if you build on it. I have to be honest, I wouldn't have thought about that like that, wouldn't have thought in that way a decade ago, but having gone in and seen some incredible PPGs, I have to say, if I was going to give you a top tip, is work out who's got a good PPG and how do they make it work for them.
If I could just as a counterpoint to that, so I agree with your principle, but I work in practice where about 40% of the population is of about 17 ethnic minorities, and our PPG is mainly retired, middle-aged, white patients, who are not able to engage with Somalians and speak English to self-manage. I wonder if you could reflect if your observation of the work you see in practice reflects that kind of ethnically diverse population.
That's always a challenge, moving away from the traditional PPG, where, dare I say it, they kind of stand up and sing Jerusalem at the start. Okay, but in some areas that's appropriate because that's the patient population mix. Down in Birmingham, there's a surgery where 97% of the patient population are from overseas, and only 10% of them have English as a first language. And they've managed to crack that resistance to, dare I say, hard-to-treat groups joining their PPG. It does require effort, it requires support from practice, but it also wants the PPG themselves to change. And there is that power dynamic. But the really good PPGs know for a fact what their ethnic makeup is, for example, or their age group profile is, and they've actively worked to get that to reflect their population groups. No perfect answer.
I think my point was more that if you have a community of 90% Pakistani Muslims who are one community, it's not difficult to draw members of that community to lead PPG. If you have 20 different ethnic minorities who are very disparate, getting adequate representation to them support those communities back can be quite difficult. I'm not pleasing about it, I just make it.
No, and accept it is difficult, and you're not going to please all the people all the time. But I suppose if you can point to your PPG and say it has a reasonable reputation or a reasonable sort of representation of different ethnic groups, that's sometimes as much as you can do. But you're right, otherwise I think we're missing a trick. Inadequate characteristics. I'll just touch on this very briefly. Weak leadership. I have been into some incredibly chaotic surgeries. I'm pretty sure that every one of you went into some of these surgeries, you tend to agree with the judgments we give. For whatever the reasons which underlie the inadequacies, the bottom line is these surgeries are not providing safe, effective care for their patients. Thankfully, they're small in number, but they are out there, and we've got to realise that they're out there, and we've got to do something to support them and support the patients who they look after as well. There is something about weak leadership in these surgeries and weak management and people not understanding the difference. I think sometimes the world has just passed these places by over the past 20 years. They're not always small surgeries, they're not always in urban areas, but it's like, you know, the world has just passed them by. They haven't noticed what's going on around, and we turn up and it's a big surprise to them, some of the things that we sort of look for. And those are the type of surgeries which haven't been coming to LMC learning events. Okay. Isolated working, lack of vision, a poor culture of safety and learning. How many people here have had formal patient safety training? One. How many people here have had formal training in quality improvement? Couple more, 3 or 4. The reason I say that is I've been fortunate enough to have patient safety training and quality improvement training. What I haven't said is I'm a Health Foundation Quality Improvement Fellow, so it's kind of stuff that interests me. But when I go into surgeries and we talk about quality improvement, and people always think that's 2-cycle audit, that's just one form of quality improvement. when I say to surgeries, what are your challenges, what are your problems, and what tactics are you employing to try and improve the situation, be they clinical figures, be they patient survey figures, be they processes, in some surgeries you just get a completely blank look. They say we've got 100% quaff and that's all we need to do. But they haven't even drilled down into the quaff figures to go, well actually they have a very high exemption reporting rate, or they may not be so good in the cervical smear domain. So they actually haven't thought about what their own data is telling them. Disregard for HR processes, DBS checks, I think a lot of that is all old hat now. These were issues we picked up at the start, and in fairness to providers through the work of LMCs, the number of surgeries which we come across where HR issues, DBS, all that sort of stuff is an issue is pretty minuscule. But where they are issues, they tend to be surgeries where things have passed them by. Unsafe medicines management, I think this comes back to variability and the safety piece. So, how many people here are sure that they have a process where MHRA alerts will come into a nominated person in the surgery? Yeah. How many people here are sure that they've been able to track every MHRA alert that's come into the surgery, in the sense that you're able to demonstrate that somebody has done the search and made the patient's changes where appropriate? Okay. Would anyone be surprised if I said that when we run searches around amlodipine and simvastatin, which is a medical one going back to 2012, where we find large numbers of patients didn't have those alterations made despite this being a well-known historical alert? Would anyone be surprised by that? You're nodding at me. Do you want to share something?
No, we revisited some old ones as part of our quality improvement to make sure that the learning we learned several years ago was still there, because our whole partnership has changed to find that some of that learning was no longer there because the people were different, so we've had to learn it again.
And that is the challenge, isn't it? All of these alerts are coming out, new knowledge is constantly coming out. How do we keep up to date? Unless you're currently, how do you find the time to keep going around some of these historical alerts? So I've said to people, have you heard about the alert around potassium-sparing diuretics and ACE inhibitors or ARBs? And I go to surgeries and sometimes I get a blank look from them. I don't need to do a computer search, I don't need to do a record search. If they've never heard of the alert, the chances are that they will have patients who will be at risk on these combinations of medications because they haven't got a higher state of alert around them. So while on unsafe medicines management, most surgeries have cracked emergency drugs, oxygen defibrillators, all of that sort of stuff. How many people here would expect to have patients on ACE inhibitors or ARBs who have not had a U&E in 18 months?
I'm only sure there are a few.
A few.
We might use people in and
Yeah.
say, do we then withdraw the medication? And we have done that.
Yeah.
We can now start doing so.
2 years? 3 years? 4 years? So what we found, interestingly enough, from looking at high-risk medicines, is a number of things, is that really good surgeries know who those patients are, and it's crystal clear from a record review that that's a managed risk between you and the patient sometimes, but if not, as you as a provider in isolation. But there's other cases where we find just people are completely oblivious to that risk, and they go, that would never happen here, but the reality is it has. Okay? Similar issues around methotrexate, I could go on and on. How many people here have EMIS? Just hands up, something. You all familiar with EMIS libraries? And have you looked at the audit tools in EMIS libraries? Some of them. Is everybody else on System 1? You're all aware that there's similar audit tools in System 1 to look at most of your high-risk medicines. You just have to know where to find them. And I'll come back to that. So there's some examples of inadequate care, out-of-date meds. I've kind of covered some of this stuff. You'll get the slide set. Has the CQC made any difference? Well, our remit is to demonstrate that we can show we've improved the quality of care which patients receive across the board. And when we've re-inspected, actually 90% of surgeries have improved their rating. I wonder, is that anything because we've done, or the fact is that we've tipped up, written a report, the surgeries have read the report and just got it right, which arguably 80% of them did the first time, and that's just a moot point. Everyone familiar with that phrase? That's actually lifted from a book, 5 Days of Memorial, of some fancy hospital in New Orleans. Hurricane Katrina came in, they ran out of water and electricity after 2 days and they started euthanizing patients. So the phrase, it couldn't happen here, putting the most dangerous words in healthcare. And many people, which is why I've asked you about ACE inhibitors and stuff, could go, that would never happen in my surgery. And the reason I go back and ask questions is how many people have read reports about surgeries which are potentially inadequate, and ask yourselves the question, could some of those failings happen here, and if so, could we do something about it? Those are some of the key themes. Somebody talked about variability and infection control. I promise I'll come back to that. Storage of emergency equipment, fridges, temperatures. I sometimes wonder, how many people here have been a non-responder to hepatitis B immunisations? Personally, many of you have had more than three jabs to get yourself up. But it took me about 5 jabs, and I sometimes wonder, was actually there a problem with the vaccines I was getting because of cold chain failures? And I don't think anyone has ever sat down and had a look at that, but we have come across providers, and it's not uncommon, where they've essentially been cooking the vaccines over a prolonged period of time. They didn't have any idea. But we may not see the impact of that for 5, 10 or even 15 years. How am I doing for time, Michael?
Good.
Yeah, okay. Most of these things don't exist in Nottingham, because most people came to the training days and most people were aware we were going to ask the sort of simple stuff. But none of this stuff is about resource in your surgery. These are just kind of simple things, and if you can get these simple things right consistently, chances are you'll get the other things right on a consistent basis too. Key themes in good care. Relationships, model of working. I think those surgeries which had sat down and thought about their data, and that goes beyond just looking at your QOF and making sure you get 99% of the points, were the ones which are really, really good in terms of being effective, because their quality improvement work is targeted at the stuff that needs improving, and they've thought about it, and they have a systematic approach every single year to try to improve certain parts of their QOF, even when they have 100% achievement, because you can get 100% of points for achieving 75%, 80% of the indicators. So the really good surgeries look at the cervical smear rate at 80% and go, how we can get it to 85%, 90%. And that's what quality improvement means. It's not about 2-cycle audits, which frankly don't cut the mustard and rarely seem to be related to what the practice needs to do in terms to improve care, from my humble opinion. And they've thought about the local population, so you know if you have a high ethnic population, you know if you have a young population, you target your work around that. Caring, actually the ratings in caring are very much based on your National Patient Survey data, and people kind of moan and groan about the National Patient Survey data, but actually it's a pretty reliable indicator. And when we go into surgeries and we talk to patients, we get other feedback, there does tend to be a good correlation with it. Interestingly enough, where the feedback is outstanding, patients rarely say, or surgeries rarely say, actually we don't like the National Patient Survey data, which says we're so fabulous. Okay. Lack of compassion and respect, patients' privacy and dignity. Actually, I think even in the really, really poor surgeries, the staff, the GPs, the nurses, the managers, they all care deeply. Actually, I've seen 1 or 2 cases of malevolence in 18 months, 2 years. So everyone actually really does care. They are all patient-centred. The issue is that they don't have the skills and the processes in place to make sure they actually deliver the effective, safe care that's needed. But if you ask me, even in the inadequate surgeries, do people care? Yeah, absolutely they do. Responsive is the interesting one. This is around access and stuff. When I look at the data, actually, I think most patients are reasonably happy with their access most of the time. No one's going to be completely satisfied all of the time, and I think there is a disconnect between what publicly might be said by politicians about what good access looks like and what's the reality of the contract. But more often than not, even when we go into surgeries which are struggling and under pressure, the patients unanimously say that if I'm sick, I can always get seen on the day. And I think that reflects positively on general practice despite the circumstances. Okay, we get some exceptions where surgeries don't do appointments until 10 o'clock in the morning and don't see many patients during the day at all, and some funny biz, but not up this neck of the woods, and tends to be rare. There is some innovation going on around there. I think in sort of 3 or 4 years' time, there'll be a lot more Skype consulting going on. Now, people are selling Skype as being something new and fabulous. To me, it's just a new version of a telephone call. But it does mean that the patients don't need to come into the surgery. But undoubtedly, it'll be coming in. It goes back to working closely with other services. I think that's about your ability to get stuff for nothing out of other people and how you go about doing that. And some surgeries have really cracked that over a period of time, particularly with their PPGs. Well led. You know, most surgeries are well led. They are patient-centred. A lot of surgeries have been around for 50, 60, 70 years, so that's not by chance or by luck. But undoubtedly it's becoming increasingly problematic for them to deliver the services in line with contractual requirements, patient expectation, and regulatory requirements too, and that's definitely getting trickier. We look through population groups. This is something I don't think we've really cracked in the way that we perhaps could have done if I go back 2.5 years. So in other words, do we describe the patient journey in your surgery, be it a pregnant woman, somebody with mental health problems, somebody with a long-term condition? Do we describe that journey as eloquently as we could do or should do? Because as we move towards new models of care and large-scale providers, actually, I think those population group descriptors are going to become much more relevant to what reports look like than the key questions of safe and effective care and responsive. So in other words, if you're providing long-term conditions, do we think you're good at it or outstanding at it? But I think that's the next stage of development where we'll be going. You can tell somebody in London has done this slide set. Our challenge to the primary medical sector. And actually, I think that should be the sector's challenge to itself, as opposed to somebody necessarily down in London putting this in the slide. I think some of those points are self-explanatory. You know, strong governance and visible leadership. Well, what does that mean in a small surgery? What does it mean in a medium-sized surgery? And what does it mean in a large surgery? At the moment, there's over 8,000 general practices out there in England. Does anyone want to hazard a guess how many there will be in 5 years' time or 10 years' time? Less. Half. Yeah. How many do people think we need? I said I was going to open up a debate. We just had Chan talking about large GP at scale. To a point. To a point.
That's how they operate.
Yeah, that's how they operate at the moment. But if you go and look at MMP in Birmingham, which has a list size of 63,000 patients, was previously 14 independent practices, which is now operating as one super surgery, super partnership, whatever language you want to use, and has 10 sites. 14 providers have gone down into one. So I'm not going to say that's going to happen everywhere, but it does make you think about how many providers there will be out there in 5 years' time. Now, I think governance and leadership are easier to do at scale, particularly with the complexities of healthcare. So when I was first a partner, we had a list size of 10,000, and that would have been considered a reasonably big-ish surgery at that point in time. But now 10 or 12,000 patients is now medium size, depending on the patch you're in. Whereas the reality is you might need 20, 25,000 patients really to be economically or clinically sustainable going forward. That's my personal guess. And looking, as yet, we're not able to say from our reports that surgeries with 25,000 patients or 30,000 patients have done better. That's actually not the case. But I think going forward, if they get their governance right, that possibly will be the case. And MMP are a really good example of what good governance looks like at scale. You'll all be interested to know, well, what will this mean for you? Everyone's keen to reduce the amount of duplication. The point I'd like to pick up from Chan talked about was QOF this morning, and the turning off of QOF in some places, and what does that mean? What does it mean for you? What does it mean for patients? And I think the challenge there is, will we have one version of the truth, where everyone's looking at the same data set and agreeing the same thing? Because I think the risk of locality, regional and national variation, QOF, for all its faults, was evidence to show reduced variability of care in bundles and pathways across England over a period of time. But I've been to one or two Vanguard sites where they've had permission to sort of turn it off, and they just have one mental health indicator, and that's it. So where's the parity of esteem for people with mental health? So is turning off QOF the panacea that it's meant to be? I'm just not so sure. I think it'll be 5 minutes. Okay. For the health resources. Support for poor performing practices doesn't really apply up here. I know you're all busy. I think it's highly unlikely you would have had the chance to read most of these reviews of care, but I think if you're working at a higher level, they just might give you a clue as to what regulation of systems and large systems is going to look like over the next couple of years. And that's a particularly good one we did recently, particularly around children's services. Okay. Have I answered the variability question? If I haven't, just say so, and I'll try and... It is about humans, it is about data, and it is about us learning as we go along. To those surgeries who feel that they've been hard done by and have had a variable experience compared to their colleagues down the road, all I can do is say sorry. It wasn't deliberate. Where that's happened, and we've heard about it, we've tried to put it right, but I don't have a bulging inbox of complaints, and nor does the local inspection manager. So whether that means we're getting it right in Nottingham, or just people are just keeping their heads down, I'm never quite so sure. So there's the variability piece.
On variability, our second team, none of the inspectors currently worked in the primary care sector.
Okay.
In the first team, they did. And I think that was part of our variability.
Okay. Were you a follow-up inspection, fully comprehensive or a focused?
Follow-up.
Was it a...
But they did do a full one.
Did a full one. And what was the gap between the inspections?
18 months.
Yeah. Dare I say it, even though the methodology is the same, our approach is slightly different 18 months on. And you will find us kind of looking at different things, particularly if we've seen the fact that the original issues have been fixed and sorted. As to who should be inspecting, well, most of our inspectors at this stage have been doing primary care inspections for 2.5, 3 years, and they will have seen a variety of surgeries, good, bad, and mostly outstanding around here. They will have seen the different types, so they understand what they're looking at. And our GP spas, with the odd exception, have all had a reasonably have either come from training backgrounds, appraisal backgrounds. So while they may not have worked for 1 or 2 years sitting doing surgery behind the coal face, to say that they have 20 or 30 years experience in primary care behind them would be an underestimate in most cases. But if you feel a surgery, if you feel that you've been inspected by a team which is completely out of touch, we need to know that. Occasionally we've had people who we felt have been out of touch and we've moved them on, but it hasn't been common.
I was just going to say, you said you didn't have a bulging inbox, but I think if you get the response when you sort of query a couple of things about the inspection, we got good, that was fine,
Yeah.
we just queried a couple of things, but if you don't get the response, well, we can do it again, nobody's going to go any further or complain, are they? So you won't know.
So, there's 2 points about that. I've had more complaints around people who've been rated as good and not outstanding than people who've been rated requires improvement and not good. And that's something about the disappointment of not getting a better rating. Yeah, no, there is that. And in some places it's tricky to do the comparisons because, you know, who has ownership of the innovation? And that's the one thing we're always careful of. Is this something the practices actually led on themselves and done it themselves, or is it just something which has been rolled out across the CCG or in pilot areas? And sometimes we've got caught on that. I also see what we call the factual accuracy challenges that come back in. In other words, people say, well, you didn't look at this, and you didn't look at that, and you didn't take that into account. I think we're a bit more sophisticated in how we respond to that feedback from practices now than we were 18 months or 2 years ago. I've always said to our team that I'd rather we got the judgment right, and that means changing a rating, just change the rating, as opposed to dying a ditch over what you think you saw in a day. But I don't know, Mary, if that's going to answer your own personal... What answer would you expect?
Lie down rather than pursuing it because they think, oh, okay, good, expect me again there.
Okay, so you're right. This fear factor. Do surgeries lie down and not complain because it means putting their head across the parapet? I don't think that's the case. However, where that is the case, I would then sort of go, well, why haven't we had a bulging email inbox from the LMCs who are not shy about coming forward about where there's been issues and concerns? No, just general disappointment. Yeah.
Could I just raise an experience that we had in Nottingham City?
Mm-hmm.
There was a practice that was inspected several times and eventually their registration was suspended. And the practices locally that had to pick up the aftermath were literally informed on the day of the suspension, resulting in the exodus of a very large number of patients of disgruntlement. And the impact on those practices, trying to pick up the pieces in the immediate assumption was enormous. Lots of very upset, very aggressive patients who felt those practices somehow being complicit in their beloved practice being suspended. Staff taking a lot of abuse which was unnecessary, resulting in some surgeries and some of those staff leaving, which is horrendous when you're already under additional pressure. Now, I appreciate that the response I had was that this was an issue for the CCG as the provider to commission general practice services for those patients. But can I just raise my desperate urge for the CQC to consider that wider impact of those decisions are made and how they can mitigate and forward plan for it with the CCGs?
Okay. There's a couple of points there. The number of suspensions and cancellations we've done nationally, I don't think there's been more than 20. So when it comes along, it's rare. When we've done it, it has been absolutely justified because patients have been put at risk over a prolonged period of time, and frankly the care has been so unsafe that actually letting it go for another day or a week doesn't seem the right thing to do. It's not an excuse, but we're slightly hamstrung by the law, because the law says that unless we take urgent action, actually it can't be that urgent, so you can't suspend them. So we're slightly handicapped by that. before we make any decision to suspend or cancel a registration, we ensure ourselves as much as we possibly can with NHS England and the CCGs that they have some form of plan B in place to try and support the patients and the practices that are going to have to pick up the mess. I can't comment on your particular case, but I've seen some CCGs that have done it brilliantly. The question I ask myself is, how did the system allow those surgeries to become so bad where action was only taken after we tipped up? Because I think we'll all know deep down those small number of surgeries providing unsafe care, particularly the CCG level, and why have they had to wait for us to turn up and inspect them on the day? The thing we've tried to impress on our inspectors is to understand the context. So if you are inspected, having taken on 300, 400, 500 patients, having the surgery down the road closed, that we don't make the mistake of beating you over the head with a big stick because everything isn't wonderful. And we might have got that wrong, I think, in the early days. But I think we have a better appreciation of the impact on surgeries. But we don't underestimate it for a second. We're slightly hamstrung. And this is where Steve Field sometimes evokes the ire of the general practice community when he said, well, we know who these people are, we've all known about it, it's been fugitive knowledge for a long period of time, and why did it require us to tip up to do something about it?
In the example I'm thinking, it wasn't their first inspection, it was being served inspection.
Yeah.
There was, in my personal view, a lot of time where a good backup plan could have been put in place. And I guess I throw back, in a friendly way, could we see the CQC and NHS England negotiate some sort of, how do we manage it when it goes on? It's gone wrong at least 20 times, how do we manage it when it goes wrong in the future? Rather than putting it down to the individual CQC, you might never have to do it before.
Yeah, I think that learning is there with NHS England, and we pointed out what good looks like. I think there's more a point about CCG capacity to do some of this stuff. And I think that reflects on the size of the CCGs, and as much as it does anything else. I don't want to go down that particular rabbit hole, but you might get where I'm coming from. I'm kind of hoping that when we come the second round, most of those surgeries which are inadequate are now ORI or better, and the chances of that happening again going forward are going to be reduced. I think, and I don't know if anyone's turned up yet in terms of general practice at scale, I wonder in 2 or 3 years' time, when you have GP providers who are looking after 50, 60, 100, 200,000 patients, a bit like large trusts, what do we do when they become too big to fail? And I think that's where the thinking needs to be next, not the small surgery of 3,000 or 4,000 patients, which will cause havoc and disruption for those who have to pick up the mess, and I get that. But actually, if anyone's going to do some system thinking now, it's about what does too big to fail look like in general practice in 2 or 3 years' time. Because I think some of the emerging super federations are fantastic, they've got the governance cracked. I wonder about those ones which are kind of going beyond the boundaries and picking up new stuff, and are they actually paying attention to what the core principles of good general practice of primary care looks like. Michael, you can say you heard that here first.
You touched on it very briefly. Can I just ask what the future looks like? You touched on the fact that the practices have now been inspected, and I know there's work going on to sort of shape that. The slide says that there. Are you able to share any thoughts on that at the moment?
So there's a huge piece of consultation going on with the BMA and the RCGP. I think everyone agrees that the whole idea that we would take this wagon trail all around the practices again at scale like we've done this time doesn't need to happen and isn't going to happen. I think preliminarily they're kind of saying that those surgeries which are rated as good or outstanding, you're looking at a 3-year window. But then how do we know to go back into providers when the risk has escalated? And that's what we're trying to tease out at the moment. Also, how do the GMC, the CQC, and the commissioners work much closer together so we target the resources appropriately as opposed to reinventing the wheel every single time, and I think that's something which attention needs to be paid to. I've always been interested in terms of the variability around training practices and why Health Education England, who have this methodology where they inspect training practice regularly, how that always hasn't been, how training practices aren't always good or better. So there is something about the model that we use, how do we use it proportionally, and what's important going forward. Now for me, Legionella is not important going forward, high-risk medicines are. Adherence to NICE guidelines, those are the important things, but how are we going to make sure we look at what's important to patients, and actually to most clinicians, as opposed to necessarily always holding on to some regulatory point around a piece of minutiae. Because I think where we've done ourselves a disservice is the perception around the minutiae that we've picked up, which have always masked some of the bigger points we've made about safety. The justification for increasing the CQC fees. Is my taxi running outside, is it?
No sign of it.
That's a really good question, how much the fees are and what you're paying for. Is there another way around this? And I don't know the answer to that.
We don't know what we're paying.
No, I know what you're paying for currently, but do I know what the future model and the impact and the costs of regulation are going to be going forward? I'm not sure. If you think about providing general practice at scale, if you're part of a large federation where it is just one provider, it's one set of fees irrespective of the number of locations you have. There is a cost to regulation. Part of me wonders with my quality improvement hat on is we have so many people looking at providers, whether it's not just ourselves, we've got incredible number of commissioners around, we've got NHS England, we've got all of these structures supposedly looking at different parts of the system, but actually it's not tied up. So I think the question is, how do we make sure whatever money we spend on non-core services, in other words stuff which isn't direct patient care and that includes commissioning, has to be spent a little bit more cleverly. So I go back to, if you take CCGs, they all employ pharmacists, yet the pharmacists seem to be employed looking at cost improvements, but not safety improvements. So the question is, how do we use the staff that we've got better, and how do we just make it simpler? The costing argument isn't going to go away. Somebody somewhere has to pay for regulation. Is it proportionate? How much does it cost to have an inspection every 3 years as opposed to every 5 years? But for me, I think the way around that as providers is to form a federation, and that will reduce the costs. I know you won't be happy with that answer. No, it's going to be free. Any other thoughts? Michael, thank you for the opportunity.
Just waiting to turn on again, like, so we're back on. So I think we should thank John really for his time in coming and talking. So we're just going to have a 5-minute turnaround really before David comes to talk about the STP ahead of lunch at 12:30. So just a couple of minutes and we'll be straight back on to learn about the Sustainability and Transformation Plan.
Hi, thank you.
I was on time.